In October of 1942, a Japanese-American photographer named Toyo Miyatake was led off a bus in the Owens Valley of Central California, told to leave his suitcase behind, and registered as a prisoner. He was one of 11,070 people imprisoned at a place called Manzanar. Cameras were forbidden, so Miyatake smuggled in a single lens, asked a carpenter inside the camp to build him a wooden box, and improvised a camera in his barracks. He told his teenage son that he had a responsibility as a photographer to record what was happening there, so that this kind of thing would never happen again. He photographed at dawn for 2 years. The military police never caught him. The pictures he made of guard towers, of weddings, of children walking to school behind barbed wire are now considered some of the most important documentary photographs in American history. The camp where he worked is mostly gone. The barracks were dismantled, the barbed wire was removed, but the obelisk at the cemetery is still standing. The wind in the Owens Valley is still cold, and what Miyatake saw is still there. That is one abandoned place in California. There are 9 more. A ghost town sinking into San Francisco Bay, a utopian socialist colony in the Mojave, a Victorian bathhouse that was the largest in the world, a Death Valley settlement where Charles Manson was eventually arrested, and a town nobody has heard of that was the first in California, founded and governed entirely by Black Americans. These are 10 abandoned places Google Maps will not show you before we get into it. Like this video, and drop your town and the time you are watching in the comments. I want to see how far these videos travel. And number 2 on this list is a place almost nobody has heard of, but it changed American history. So stick around. Also, do you know that America has more abandoned and forbidden places than almost any country on Earth? Ghost towns, haunted prisons, nuclear sites. Most people will never hear about them. I wrote a free ebook covering all 50, what happened there, why they were abandoned, and which ones you can still walk through today. Links in the comment of this video. This one's not staying up forever. Alright, let's get into it. Number 10. Drawbridge. 6 miles south of Fremont in the marshlands at the southern end of San Francisco Bay, there are about 24 wooden buildings slowly sinking into the mud. They are the remains of a town called Drawbridge. It is the only ghost town in the San Francisco Bay Area, and almost nobody in the Bay Area has heard of it. Drawbridge began in 1876 as a single cabin built by the South Pacific Coast. Railroad had been founded that same year by 2 men with extraordinary names: Alfred Hogg Davis, a meatpacking magnate, and Slippery Jim Fair, a politician who had made his fortune in the Comstock silver mines. They needed someone to operate 2 manual drawbridges that crossed Coyote Creek and Mud Creek Slough, so they built a cabin on Station Island, hired an operator, and called the spot Drawbridge. The cabin was the beginning. Within 30 years, Drawbridge had become a weekend destination. Sportsmen rode the train from San Francisco for hunting and fishing. 2 hotels were built. By the 1920s, the town had 90 buildings and a reputation. During Prohibition, Drawbridge became known for speakeasies and brothels, hidden in the marsh, accessible only by train, with residents who were nearly all armed. Local police rarely entered. The town governed itself. The end came slowly. In the 1930s, the South Bay began drawing groundwater from the aquifer below Drawbridge to supply San Jose. The land began to sink. The freshwater wells in the town went dry. One resident reportedly cooked in galoshes while a fish swam in and out of her kitchen. By 1963, fewer than 5 residents remained. By 1979, only one was left, a man named Charlie Luce, who told reporters his windows had been shot out so many times he had lost count. He left that year. The town has been empty ever since. Drawbridge is now part of the Don Edwards San Francisco Bay National Wildlife Refuge. It is closed to the public. The trains still run past it several times a day, but they do not stop. From the windows, you can see the buildings tilted at impossible angles, slumped sideways into the mud they were built on. Each year, the marsh takes a little more. A town that was built to operate a bridge, and a bridge that decided in the end not to operate at all. Number 9. Llano del Rio. In the high desert about 90 miles north of Los Angeles, on the edge of the Mojave, there are the ruins of an enormous fireplace, 2 stone columns, and the foundations of about 30 buildings scattered across the sagebrush. The site is called Llano del Rio. It was, for about 3.5 years, the largest non-religious utopian socialist colony in the history of the United States. The colony was founded in 1914 by a lawyer named Job Harriman. Harriman had been the Socialist Party candidate for the mayor of Los Angeles in 1911. He had nearly won. When his campaign collapsed in the wake of the McNamara brothers bombing scandal, Harriman decided that political activity through the ballot was hopeless. The system was corrupt beyond fixing. The only path forward was to build a parallel society outside of it. He bought 10,000 acres in the Antelope Valley and announced a cooperative community where the means of production would be owned in common and every member would receive an equal share of the proceeds. It worked for a while. By 1917, Llano del Rio had over 900 residents. There was a hotel, a hog farm, a steam laundry, an arts and crafts studio, a Montessori school, an orchestra, and a daily newspaper. Children were raised collectively. Women had the right to vote in colony decisions, which was 3 years before the United States Constitution gave them the same right at the federal level. Visitors arrived by stagecoach to see the experiment. The collapse came from the most ordinary thing in California: water. The colony's water rights were contested by neighboring ranchers. The legal fight dragged on for years. The wells could not be deepened without state approval. By 1918, the colony had relocated to Louisiana, where it survived in reduced form until 1938. The Mojave site was abandoned. In 1937, the British novelist Aldous Huxley moved to the high desert just a few miles from the Llano del Rio ruins. He wrote about them in an essay called Ozymandias, the Utopia That Failed. He stood among the broken stone columns and thought about every other society that had imagined a better future and had been unable to keep it. The desert always wins eventually. The wind is patient. The sand has nowhere else to be. A colony of 900 people, a fireplace, and the patience of the Mojave. Number 8, Sutro Baths. On the cliffs above the Pacific Ocean at the western edge of San Francisco, just below the Cliff House restaurant, there are the ruins of what was once the largest indoor swimming complex in the world. Sutro Baths covered 3 acres. It held 6 saltwater pools and 1 freshwater pool. It could accommodate 10,000 swimmers at a time. The roof was made of 100,000 square feet of stained glass, and in 1966, the entire complex burned to the ground in a single night. The baths were the obsession of one man. Adolf Sutro was a German immigrant who had made his fortune in the Comstock silver mines of Nevada and then settled in San Francisco. He served 1 term as mayor. He owned, at one point, 1/12 of the entire city. And he wanted to give San Francisco something that no other city had: a bathing palace. Construction began in 1894. The complex was carved into the cliffside. Seawater filled the pools at high tide through a system of tunnels and gates. There were 3 restaurants, an amphitheater with seating for 3,700, museum exhibits from Sutro's personal collection that included Egyptian mummies, taxidermied animals, and Pacific Rim artifacts, and a small ice rink. Admission was 25 cents. By the time the baths opened in 1896, they were already legendary. The decline took decades. The novelty of indoor swimming faded. The complex was expensive to heat. Sutro died in 1898, and his descendants ran the property at a steady loss for 3 generations. By the 1960s, the building was operating as an ice skating rink for a fraction of its original capacity, surrounded by the empty shells of its pools. The fire began on June 26, 1966. The building was scheduled for demolition the next month. Investigators later concluded that the fire was arson, likely set by the developer who was waiting to clear the site for a luxury apartment complex. The apartments were never built. The cliffs are now part of the Golden Gate National Recreation Area. You can walk down to the foundations of the pools, which are still there, partially flooded, lined with seaweed and crabs. The walls of the changing rooms are still visible. The tunnels that brought in the seawater are still there. A palace built to hold 10,000 swimmers, destroyed by one man with a match and a property speculator behind him. If you have made it this far, the next 3 entries are where this list gets genuinely strange. Number 4 is a town that the state still has not fully explained, and number 3 has a fact that will change the way you think about California in the 1960s. Number 7, Calico. in the Mojave Desert about 10 miles northeast of Barstow, on a hillside of red and white striated rock that looks like a watercolor painting. There are the remains of a silver mining town that briefly produced more silver than almost anywhere in the country. The town is called Calico. Its history is a textbook example of California boom and bust, and it has been rescued from total disappearance by the same man who invented Knott's Berry Farm. Calico was founded in 1881 after a silver strike in the surrounding hills. Within 5 years, it had a population of about 1,200 people, 500 mines in the surrounding area, a school, 3 hotels, 22 saloons, several boarding houses, a stock exchange, and a Chinatown. The town also had a famously eccentric mascot, a dog named Dorsey who delivered mail between Calico and the nearby town of Bismarck for nearly 3 years. Dorsey carried letters in saddlebags strapped to his back. He had no human guide. He simply made the trip both directions on his own. The post office paid him in bones. The silver bust came in 1896 when the Silver Purchase Act was repealed and the price of silver collapsed. The mines closed within months. The miners left. By 1907, the town was empty. The buildings stood vacant for nearly 50 years, slowly being eaten by the desert. In 1951, a businessman named Walter Knott visited the ruins. Knott had grown up in Calico. His uncle had been a silver miner there. Knott had already made his fortune by inventing Knott's Berry Farm, an amusement park built around his wife's boysenberry pies. He bought the entire Calico site and spent the next 10 years restoring 5 original buildings to their 1880s condition. The rest he reconstructed, using historical photographs and his own memories. The town reopened as a tourist attraction in 1966. Today, Calico is run by the San Bernardino County Regional Park System. The streets are paved. There are shops selling fudge. There are gunfight reenactments. It is a theme park version of a ghost town, which is its own kind of ghost. The dog Dorsey is buried somewhere on the property, in an unmarked grave. A silver town that died was reborn as a tribute to itself and is now a tribute to the boysenberry pie that funded the resurrection. Number 6. Cerro Gordo. In the Inyo Mountains above Owens Lake, about 3 hours north of Los Angeles by car, there is a silver mining town at an elevation of 8,500 feet that produced the wealth that built the modern city of Los Angeles. Its name is Cerro Gordo, which means fat hill in Spanish. The hill has lived up to the name. Silver was discovered at Cerro Gordo in 1865. By the 1870s, the mines were producing so much silver and lead that the ore could not be transported fast enough. A mining engineer named Mortimer Belshaw built a road down the side of the mountain that solved the bottleneck. Belshaw's road, called the Yellow Grade, was 8 miles long and dropped 4,000 feet in elevation. Mule teams hauled ore down the road to the lakeshore, where steamships carried it across Owens Lake to be loaded onto wagons bound for Los Angeles. The wealth from Cerro Gordo flowed directly into Los Angeles. The city was a small farming town of about 5,000 people when the silver started arriving. The Cerro Gordo bullion paid for the construction of warehouses, banks, and shipping infrastructure that turned Los Angeles into a serious commercial center. Without Cerro Gordo, the city's growth would have looked very different. The mountain made the city possible. The bust came in the 1880s when the easy silver ran out and the price dropped. The town shrank. By the 1940s, it was mostly abandoned, although a handful of buildings survived because of the dry mountain air and the difficulty of reaching the site to vandalize it. In 2018, a 30-year-old hostel owner from Texas named Brent Underwood and his business partner John Beer bought the entire town for $1.4 million. Underwood moved up to the mountain in March of 2020, 3 days before the COVID lockdown began. He has been there ever since. He documents the restoration of the town on his YouTube channel, Ghost Town Living. He has rebuilt the American Hotel, which had burned down in 2020. He has restored the bunkhouse. He has been chased by a mountain lion on the property and discovered a sealed mine shaft that had not been entered in over 100 years. A mountain that built Los Angeles, abandoned for 40 years, rescued by a man with a camera and a hammer, and $1.4 million in patience. Number 5. Bombay Beach. About 150 miles southeast of Los Angeles, on the eastern shore of the Salton Sea, there is a community of roughly 250 people called Bombay Beach. It is the lowest community in the United States. at 223 feet below sea level. Most of it is abandoned. The buildings are slowly being eaten by salt, and the lake that the town was built on is one of the most disturbing environmental disasters in American history. The Salton Sea did not exist before 1905. It was created by accident. Engineers building an irrigation canal from the Colorado River miscalculated the structural requirements. The canal broke, and the entire flow of the river poured into a low-lying desert basin for 18 months before it could be stopped. The result was a lake the size of Lake Tahoe, sitting in the middle of the Sonoran Desert, where there had been almost nothing for thousands of years. For a while, the accident looked like a miracle. By the 1950s, the Salton Sea had become a resort destination. Marinas were built, hotels opened, Frank Sinatra and the Beach Boys reportedly visited. Bombay Beach was developed as a vacation town. Property values rose. The lake was stocked with fish. The whole region was marketed as the new California Riviera. The problem was that the lake had no outlet. Agricultural runoff from the surrounding farms flowed in continuously, carrying fertilizers, pesticides, and salt. The salt concentrated. By the 1980s, the salinity of the lake was higher than that of the Pacific Ocean. The fish began dying in mass die-offs. Birds that ate the dead fish died too. The smell became unbearable in summer. The resort towns emptied out. The hotels closed. The marinas were abandoned. Bombay Beach is what remains. Many of the houses are gone. The skeletons of trailers and cabins sit in the sun, half buried in encrusted salt. In the last decade, a community of artists has moved in. There is now an annual art festival called the Bombay Beach Biennale, which fills the abandoned shells with sculptures, installations, and performances. A drowned phone booth at the edge of the lake. A swing set in the surf. A piano half submerged. A resort town built on an accident, killed by a mistake and reborn as the strangest art gallery in the United States. Number 4. Bodie. In the high desert east of the Sierra Nevada, at an elevation of over 8,000 feet, about 13 miles east of Highway 395, there is a ghost town that California has officially designated as the state's most preserved example of a Wild West mining settlement. Bodie was named after a man called William Bodie, who discovered gold in the area in 1859, then froze to death the same winter on his way back to camp with supplies. The town that bore his misspelled name went on to become one of the most dangerous and violent places in the American West. By 1880, Bodie had a population of about 8,000 people. There were 65 saloons. The town averaged a murder every other day during its peak. A common morning greeting was, "Have we a man for breakfast?" which was the polite way of asking whether anyone had been killed in the previous 24 hours. There is a famous diary entry from a little girl whose family was moving to Bodie from San Francisco. The entry has been transcribed 2 different ways, either "Goodbye God, I am going to Bodie," or "Goodbye God, I am going to Bodie." The ambiguity is appropriate. The decline of Bodie began in the 1890s as the gold deposits played out. By the 1920s, the population had dropped to under 100. A fire in 1932 destroyed about 90% of the buildings. The remaining 10%, about 150 structures, were left exactly as they were when the residents walked away. In 1962, the state of California acquired the site and created Bodie State Historic Park. The preservation philosophy is unique. It is called arrested decay. The state does not restore the buildings to a previous condition. It simply keeps them from falling down. The roofs are stabilized, the walls are propped up, but the interiors are left exactly as they were when the last resident left. Tables still have plates on them. Counters still have cans on them. The schoolhouse still has lessons on the chalkboard from 1942. There is also the Bodie curse. The state park receives hundreds of letters every year from former visitors returning items they took from the site. Each letter describes a string of bad luck the writer believes was caused by removing a brick, a bottle, a piece of broken glass, or a railroad spike from Bodie. Park staff log the returned items but do not put them back. The curse, if it exists, is supposed to be in the act of taking. A town built on a misspelled dead man's name, frozen in time at the precise moment everyone realized the gold was gone. Number 3. Ballarat. On the western edge of Death Valley, off Panamint Valley Road north of the town of Trona, There is a small cluster of adobe ruins and weathered wooden shacks that is officially known as the ghost town of Ballarat. Almost no one lives there. The population on the most recent census was 4. The desert scenery is staggering, and the town has one of the strangest dark connections in California history. Ballarat was founded in 1897 after gold strikes in the Panamint Mountains. By 1898, the population had reached 500. There were 3 hotels, 7 saloons, a post office, a Wells Fargo stop, a jail, a school, and a brothel. The town was named after a gold rush town in Australia. The miners who arrived expected to find the same kind of wealth. Some of them did. Most did not. The decline came within 2 decades. The deposits were small, scattered, and difficult to extract. By the 1920s, the town was nearly empty. The post office closed in 1917. The buildings began their slow conversion back to desert. What makes Ballarat famous or infamous is what happened in 1969. In the canyon behind the town, at a place called Barker Ranch, Charles Manson and several members of his cult, the Manson family, were hiding out in the months after the Tate LaBianca murders. The ranch was remote, difficult to reach, surrounded by dry mountains and accessible only by dirt roads. Manson believed he could organize a final apocalyptic war from the desert, which he called Helter Skelter, and emerge as the leader of what survived. The police caught up with the family in October of 1969. The arrest was for arson and grand theft auto. The murder charges came later. Manson was found hiding in a cabinet under a sink. The trial that followed became one of the most publicized in American history. Barker Ranch, where the arrest took place, is still standing about 15 miles east of Ballarat. It is reachable by a high-clearance vehicle. The cabin where Manson was caught burned down in 2009, but the foundations and outbuildings remain. Most visitors who stop at Ballarat have no idea about the connection. The wild burros do not care. A ghost town, built on gold, populated by burros, and accidentally connected to the darkest chapter of 1969 in America. Number 2. Allensworth. Halfway between Los Angeles and San Francisco, in the dry flatlands of the southern San Joaquin Valley, there is a small cluster of restored wooden buildings that almost nobody driving past has ever heard of. The town is called Allensworth. It was the first community in California founded, financed, and governed entirely by Black Americans, and it was deliberately killed by something the state government never officially acknowledged. The founder was Colonel Allen Allensworth. He had been born into slavery in Kentucky in 1842. He had escaped during the Civil War, joined the Union Navy, gone on to become an ordained Baptist minister, and eventually served as a chaplain in the United States Army, retiring in 1906 as the highest-ranking black officer in the country at the time. After his retirement, he and 4 other black professionals founded the California Colony and Home Promoting Association, with the goal of building a community where Black Americans could live and govern themselves without the constant pressure of segregation, harassment, and economic exclusion. They bought 800 acres on the Santa Fe rail line in 1908. The town grew quickly. By 1914, it had a school, a library, a Baptist church, a hotel, several businesses, and a population of about 300. Colonel Allensworth himself died in 1914, struck and killed by a motorcycle while crossing a street in Monrovia, California. The community pressed on without him. The death of the town was slower and quieter. The wells began to fail. The water supply, originally drawn from the underground aquifer beneath the town, became contaminated with arsenic at levels that made it dangerous to drink. The state, which had authority over water rights, refused for years to provide a clean water source. Other rural California communities in the area received state assistance. Allensworth did not. The residents began to leave. By the 1960s, the state finally designated the site as Colonel Allensworth State Historic Park. Most of the original buildings were reconstructed. The school, the church, the library, the homes have been rebuilt in their original positions. The site is now run as a state park with interpretive programs. The arsenic in the water has been addressed. The reason it was not addressed in time has never been officially explained. A town founded by a former slave who became a colonel, killed by water the state would not clean, and now standing in restoration as a monument to what was supposed to happen and never quite did. And number 1, Manzanar. In the Owens Valley of Central California, on a flat stretch of high desert at the foot of the Sierra Nevada, between the towns of Lone Pine and Independence, there is a former concentration camp. From March of 1942 to November of 1945, 11,070 Japanese Americans were imprisoned at Manzanar. Most of them were American citizens. They had committed no crime. They were imprisoned because their grandparents had been born in Japan. Executive Order 9066 was signed by President Franklin Delano Roosevelt on February 19, 1942, 10 weeks after the attack on Pearl Harbor. The order authorized the military to designate exclusion zones along the West Coast and to forcibly remove anyone the Army considered a security risk. In practice, it meant the rounding up of roughly 120,000 Japanese Americans from California, Oregon, and Washington, and their imprisonment in 10 camps across the western United States. Manzanar was the first to open. The site was chosen for its remoteness. The Owens Valley is one of the driest places in California. The dust storms are constant. The Army built 504 barracks on a 1-mile section of valley floor. Families lived in one-room apartments with no insulation and minimal heat. Among the 11,000 prisoners was a 47-year-old Los Angeles photographer named Toyo Miyatake. Before the war, Miyatake had run a thriving studio in Little Tokyo and had been recognized internationally as a pictorialist photographer. When he was arrested and sent to Manzanar, his cameras were confiscated. The official rule was that cameras were forbidden in the camps. Miyatake smuggled a single lens into Manzanar in his luggage. Once inside, he asked a carpenter in the camp to build him a wooden box. He attached the lens to the box. A mechanic helped him fashion drain pipe into a workable shutter mechanism. He worked at dawn before the military police completed their morning patrols. He photographed in secret. He developed the negatives at night. What Miyatake recorded was the daily life of an injustice: children walking to the makeshift school, a baseball game in the dust, a funeral at the cemetery, the guard tower, the mountains. He was eventually caught by the camp director Ralph Merritt, who did not punish him. Merritt was a complicated figure who knew the camp should not exist. He officially appointed Miyatake as the camp's photographer. Miyatake's wartime photographs, including a famous portrait of 3 boys standing behind barbed wire, are now considered among the most important images in American documentary photography. The camp closed in November of 1945. The barracks were dismantled and sold off, many of them to returning veterans who used the wood to build homes in the Owens Valley. What remained was the auditorium, the cemetery, a few foundations, and the obelisk that the prisoners had built themselves in 1943. The obelisk reads, in Japanese, "Soul Consoling Tower." People still come to leave offerings at its base: coins, paper cranes, small stones. And what Toyo Miyatake saw 80 years ago with the camera he built out of scrap wood is still there. A camp built to imprison Americans for the country their grandparents came from, recorded for the rest of history by a man with a smuggled lens in a wooden box. California is the 3rd largest state in the country by area. It has more ghost towns than any other state. Some of them are mining camps. Some are utopian communities. Some are resort towns killed by their own water. Some are sinking back into the marshes that built them. And some are places the state government created on purpose, imprisoned its own citizens in, and then quietly dismantled when the war was over. The abandoned places of California are not just stories about people who left. They are stories about decisions that someone made and that someone else paid for. Most of them are not on Google Maps. They are not advertised. They do not appear in tourism brochures. But they are still there, and the people who lived and died in them deserve to be remembered. If you think these stories are worth telling, subscribing takes 1 second, and it helps us keep making these. Thanks for watching. Every video I put out takes real time and effort, and delivering quality content to you will always be my priority. If you would like to support my channel, even something as simple as buying me a coffee goes a long way. Just scan the QR code on your screen or click the link in the comment section of this video. It may seem small, but it truly means the world to me. Thank you, and see you in the next video.